A big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video.
Oh my word, just look at this. Look at this here. The light has just got amazing. Morning everyone, fantastic to see you all again. Well, I'm in Marazion, and more specifically, or less specifically, Cornwall, and I've just been photographing these amazing birds down here. I'm here with Mass and James again, and wow, the waves even here, which is sort of sheltered, have been pretty amazing. And in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit more about shutter speed and how to use shutter speed when you're photographing waves. And I think we're going to have some pretty amazing conditions today. We're off to Sennen. It's a bit rainy, a bit sunny, the conditions are changeable. It's perfect for daytime landscape photography. Let's go. Oh, so I'm actually at one of my favourite beaches in Cornwall, Sennen, and it's so beautiful. The waves have dropped a little bit today than they were yesterday. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the photos I took yesterday, but I took some pretty amazing photos of the waves crashing yesterday. What I wanted to do really was just experiment a little bit with exposure lengths and just say that sometimes photography doesn't just have to be about getting the most amazing photo. I feel like creativity is about experimenting and just trying different things, because you know, otherwise then you're always compelled when the light's at its best to try and get that amazing photo. But if you experiment, you know, when it's perhaps not at its best, you might be surprised with the results, and also you'll be better prepared then. And I want to improve my photography, so I'm going to experiment with some exposures, some different lighting conditions, different waves. I'm going to start here with a long lens over there. I think it's going to be pretty good. I'll show you what I'm doing in a minute. Okay, so I've set up a little scene here. It's not the most amazing composition, but I'm not really worried about that. Obviously I want to try and get a nice shot, but I'm more worried about just trying different things. So at the moment there's no light at all, and it's fairly flat lighting, but it's interesting to try things like a polarizer to see how that might affect it in these types of conditions. So I can spin the polarizer and see that it's changed in the reflection on the sea. And that might make a different effect at a different shutter speed. So what I want to do is try polarize with light, without light, and also at maybe half a second and maybe something like a 500th of a second. And by doing that, when I'm in conditions like this again, when it's maybe an amazing composition, I'll just know a little bit more about what it'll look like. Now, I've got a general idea of what it'll look like, but I like to do this sort of thing all the time, because I feel like you sometimes discover stuff that you just didn't know, and it's better to discover it now than do it, you know, when I'm trying to get an amazing shot that might be a once-in-a-lifetime shot. The one thing I would say about this is that the clouds coming over at the moment are really spectacular. So if we've got a little bit of light, it could be a good shot.
So this first one is a classic fast shutter speed seascape. It's 1/640th of a second. There's a little bit of light which looks good on the hill there, but we're all interested in the waves. That's just what you'd expect. But if we take that down to 0.4 of a second, you can see that it smooths it all out. You still have a little bit of texture in the wave, but I feel because there's too much white on the waves there, and I'm probably not high enough, then it blurs into one a little bit. And if you use the polarizer, you can see that we get a slightly different effect. Now the light had changed by this point, so it might be a little bit to do with the light, but you can see that the polarizer has had an impact. And then if we go to 1.5 seconds and go vertical, I went a little bit higher for this shot, I think, and you can see that I'm splitting up these waves, and it's actually quite a nice texture, this. So the key sort of takeaway from here is that I feel like the long exposure gives a nice texture, but if you've got a lot of white, then it's going to blur it in a little bit too much, whereas the faster shutter speed helps that quite a lot. Okay, I carry on down the beach now, and the weather starts to get quite interesting.
Okay, as you can see behind me here, I am going to get absolutely soaked in a minute, but the thing is that this cloud coming over makes such a big difference to the colour of the sea. I'm just taking this shot here. I got this path going through here, I like these huts over here. It'd be nice to get some light on it, but I don't think I'm going to. But these dark clouds and the sea over here are good. I've taken a few at different exposure lengths, but I'm just about to get wet. I'm going to have to put the camera down now because this is ridiculous.
So the weather got a bit interesting. It was raining so hard. So I stopped experimenting with shutter speed, but I did carry on experimenting with the polarizer. And you can see by this first image here, I managed to get some amazing colour in the water here. And the black clouds behind were just fantastic. I got some nice shots of the sand dunes with this leading line. It worked quite well. And then I got this really nice shot with James in it. James was just walking back, getting away from the weather, and I just feel like having that one person on the beach. I've just called this shot Alone. I think it makes such a big difference. And I also felt that this black and white treatment of the sky and the seascape with those waves just looked really good as well. So I was quite pleased with this selection of photos. It wasn't so much experimenting with the actual shutter speed here. If I'm honest, I probably should have a little bit for the grasses, because it would have been nice just to have the grasses maybe just moving with a slightly longer exposure. So that's maybe something I should have done, but when the rain comes down, you just have to get what you can get.
Okay, so I've just got a nice little shot here with this pier, don't know what it is, a water break, and there's an island out there, so it's good composition. And again, I'm shooting at around about ½ second, but I'm also going to shoot some faster shutter speed shots as well. I might even combine the two, you never know, but it's pretty nice. I just want to balance the exposure. I just want some sunlight on here, and I think it looked pretty good.
So again, this wasn't the most amazing composition, but I knew that I'd be shooting waves crashing over piers throughout this trip, and I wanted to just experiment right at the beginning of the trip. So this first one here is a 1/5 of a second, and I think that works okay, but I think it needed just a little bit longer, so this one at 0.6 of a second works a lot better. When I polarized the water, I felt like wasn't 100% sure about it. I feel like it looked a little bit false. And that's the thing with the polarizer. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You've got to experiment with it. And then the final shot at 1/1000 of a second, just as a reference shot really, I don't think it works as well as a longer exposure, the 0.6 of a second. But I'd be really interested to know what you guys think, so let me know in the comments whether you like these longer exposures that are around about sort of ½ a second, or the faster exposures.
Okay, so I've just come to the other side of this pier. It's so slippy here, but I've got the most incredible waves just crashing. Basically, they're coming off the pier and then hitting each other. So they're creating just around here these really nice shapes. So I'm trying to capture that. There was a little bit of light before, but it seems to have gone. I hope I've got one of them. You can see there that are just coming together here. I've got a polarizer on just to try and reduce a little bit of the reflection. Oh, this is so epic. Such a good spot. I might do a long exposure now actually whilst the light's gone, because I think it'll look a little bit better. Try that.
So I was really keen to shoot waves like this on this trip, and this was a really good opportunity because the wave was bouncing off the pier back into the incoming waves and creating this really interesting patterns as it was crashing against each other. So it was a good location to do it. Unfortunately, I probably should have been a little bit lower, I think. It's really important when you're shooting waves like this to give them real drama for the waves to be crashing into the sky. So that was my first mistake, but I sort of knew that, and I didn't want to get absolutely soaked, and I didn't feel like the waves were that spectacular that it was worth it. In hindsight, looking back at them, I think I could have got something really good. So the longer exposure ones were good. Again, the texture of the water at the slower speeds worked nicely, but when there was a lot of white involved, then I feel like it got a little bit muddy. So the texture when it was just little bits of white worked really well. With a lot of white didn't work so well. But when I used the faster exposures, that's when these really came to life, and you can see by these selection of images here just how well that worked. After this, we started to hike up along the cliff, and oh my word, the weather was so spectacular. I forgot to video anything because I was just getting buffeted. The rain was coming down, but we got an amazing rainbow, and I managed to capture these shots.
Oh my word, just look at this. Look at this here. The light has just got amazing. So there's lots of rainstorms coming through, and basically what I'm doing is just trying to use this backlit on these waves coming in here, and then it's just a question of trying to separate everything. The seagulls are pretty good, so I've got my 24 to 200 on just to give me flexibility, which is one thing it's really good at. And I've got to be careful of the clouds, the composition of the clouds here, this rock, and then I've just had sort of a shot here which worked really well. And I'm shooting at a fast exposure at the moment. I might do some longer exposures, but I think at the moment, fast is the name of the game. This is so good, so good.
So this is where things start to get really interesting, and it's why you should just go out in the middle of the day. These shots weren't taken at sunset, they were taken in the middle of the day, and oh my word, the light was so spectacular. Rainstorm after rainstorm came through, and I decided that it was really important just to shoot at a fast shutter speed. I was doing a lot of handheld shots at the time because things were changing all over the place, and I wanted to be really dynamic in how I could sort of operate. And I took these shots which I was really pleased about. I talked in the video about that closer up one you can see here, which I think works, but it's the really wider shot with the cliffs on the left hand side that I think works the best. I've got this wave crashing, I've got the birds in the image, and I am so pleased with this shot. I then spent the rest of the time photographing this amazing sea stack with the lighthouse at Land's End in the distance. And as I explain here, the waves are so amazing.
This is so epic. Just look at this. So we've got the lighthouse, Land's End's lighthouse over there, and then we've got these rocks, and then here waves are coming in, so I'm just like getting them breaking here. Oh my word, I've just done some long exposure, and you can see as they're coming in, but the blue in the water is so incredible. You can just see this one now. And then the background, we've got rain in the background, which just looks amazing. Everything's come together. And then before, we just had a little bit of light. Oh, it was so amazing. This is like, oh, well, it doesn't get better than this, does it? Whew. And James is quite liking it over there. Not bad, is it? Not bad. I know.
Because there was a lot of white water here, I felt like the sort of half a second to 1 second exposure probably wouldn't work. I tried it, you can see it here, it wasn't in the best light, but I don't think it did work really, so I concentrated on fast exposures. They were probably between 1,000th and 2,000th of a second, and if need be, I was just up in the ISO to get that fast shutter speed, and then I was looking to just create the best shot around the waves and positioning of the waves to try and sort of give balance to this shot, because otherwise I felt it was a little bit unbalanced. And then also just concentrating on when the seagulls were coming in and trying to get those as part of the composition, which I think is really important to add an extra dimension to these seascape images. The rain continued to come by, as you can see here, and we went to probably the windiest spot in the whole of Cornwall.
So I've just been shooting at the arch that I'll show you in a second, but it's too windy. I can hardly stand up. So I've got a few shots there. It was quite difficult from a compositional point of view. You'll see the arch, well, I'll show it here on camera. I think I'm going to go back to where I was shooting earlier because I feel like it'll be a little bit better. Oh, it's already out of the wind now, that's nice. So yeah, so I've been shooting that arch there, you can just see, and it's pretty good, but I feel like actually it's quite good here. I might shoot it from here. Oh, so you can see through there. I'm gonna give that a go.
So I hope you enjoyed that. I wasn't too sure about these last two images here, but they were good to finish off the series, I suppose. And I hope you got something from that in terms of just how important it is to experiment. Digital cameras mean that it's free to take photos. You know, storage costs nothing, and especially if you're experimenting where you're probably going to throw photos away. And you know, understanding what shutter speeds to use, whether you're shooting water, waterfalls, waves, maybe rain or snow or wind. And in hindsight, in that shot that I said I should have shot a longer shutter speed for the grasses to move in the wind. I think that would have been a lot better. Like this one I shot in Harris. But I think it's so important. It's probably the thing that's elevated my photography the most, and that is experimenting and trying different things. So make sure you go and do that. I just wanted to show you a couple of images. This definitely was my favorite image. You know, I got the wave, the bird, the light, everything. But I did talk about experimenting with shutter speed with waves a lot, but obviously it matters with other things. So here you can see, this is a really fast shutter speed of 1/2500th of a second. You can see here the rain coming down. I've just caught the droplets and it doesn't look amazing. It doesn't capture the essence of it. But this one here, I've done it 1/250th of a second. You can see it's starting to streak, and I feel like that looks a lot better on the rock here as it's catching the light. Especially with snow, there's no like one shutter speed that works. You've got to decide what works for you, but it's definitely worth experimenting. The more you practice, the more it just becomes second nature. Then when you're out there in that really decisive moment when the conditions are just so amazing, you can get the shot. Anyway, I wanted to share some of the images, so I put them on a website again. In fact, I say I put them on a website. I'm just building the website with Squarespace, and Squarespace, as you know, makes it super easy to share your images. Here I'm sharing the images from this video. This is part one. We've got a part two coming next week, so don't miss that. But I've shared the images on here, and also I've just added a gallery. It's super easy just to drag and drop the images into the gallery. You can lay it out however you want. You can have 4 columns or 3 columns. You can also make it so when you click on an image, it goes into a lightbox of the image and you can scroll through them. So go and have a look at the link to that in the description, and also make sure you check out Squarespace. And if you want 10% off, you can use offer code Nigel or go to squarespace.com. Okay, that's it. And until next Sunday for part 2, where a storm comes in and things get really epic. Bye.